To call the subcommittee hearing back to order. And unfortunately, this is going to continue this afternoon for a little while, these interruptions, but we do want to proceed. And I'll make sure, and we'll keep the staff advised as to how much time we consume with questions, but we'll go to some questions, and I'll start, and then we'll afford Ms. Duckworth or the minority as much or more time, whatever they need. Just this sort of a meat and potatoes hearing. It's not a flashy one with indictments planned, at least this week. But in any event, the purpose of it is, again, as we passed MAP 21, our intent was there to try to discontinue some programs at the federal level or consolidate programs. I have a status of MAP 21 consolidation. Do we have copies of this that we can give to the witnesses? Maybe we could. But it says 52 programs identified by DOT as being affected. Some 31 programs were allegedly discontinued. And then it says 15 programs consolidated into other programs. 2 programs, eligibilities included research programs. 2 programs set aside, and 1 program with many eligibilities contained transportation alternatives, and 1 program continued substantially changed. Now, we heard Mr. Etchison talk a little bit about what DOT had done. I asked a question as to how, and he described sometime setting standards that he basically also testified that basically they had finished most of that, setting the standards. It says needed time to set standards, and then you testified that it's now completed, or it's been completed for the most part, and personnel were used in that process. So far, we can find of only about 20 FTEs that may have been eliminated. Maybe you could tell us where we are now. In your testimony, you spoke to, again, some positions being needed to get us to where we are and where we might go. That's a long question, but maybe you could respond.
Well, what MAP 21 did, the way I like to think of it, is you had a pie, federal aid highway pie. It's 40 billion, 41 billion, now 43 and increasing. Before MAP 21, there were 50-odd programs, so you have 50 slices of that pie. Now, post-MAP 21, we've got 6 or 7 slices of the pie, but the pie itself is the same size. The types of projects that are being done are the same size. So while the programs were consolidated or sometimes eliminated, all the projects that we're overseeing and all that work in terms of providing stewardship and oversight to the states continues. So it really doesn't affect our FTEs.
Now, some were devolved to California and Texas, for example.
Well, that's correct. Under our provision where we assigned NEPA to Texas and to California, the people who were responsible for doing that work, that was some of the work they were responsible for in our field offices. They have now other work that they do to oversee the state program. In addition, in both California and in Texas, we still are.
Has there been no diminishing personnel needed for Texas and California? They're pretty big states. I mean, Texas just testified 1,800 projects. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah, in the past year.
Okay. But you actually came into play about a year ago,
Exactly.
the approval. But
Yes.
that took over 2 years to get the approval, right?
It was approaching 2 years. Yes,
Yeah.
when you start with our state legislation to the MOU. Yes.
Right, so we negotiated, I think we had to promulgate the rule. They had to agree to waive sovereign immunity, and then it took about a year, with Texas really being the first one we had in the post-MAP 21, where we had one of these MOUs. We're nearly final with Ohio, and we just last week received an application from Utah. And so I think with Texas paving the way.
Oh, you've answered some questions. I know Florida was trying, when Aneth Prasad was the secretary, to take over the IJR, interchange justification process report, at the state level, and I think another state had already done that. Has Texas taken over IJRs?
Texas has not taken over the IJRs yet.
Well, he told me it was just a few months. Now, he's been gone a year, and I asked most recently Florida if that had been taken over, and they said no. What's the story there in trying to get more approvals done? A lot of what we looked at, too, in the permitting, the same requirements were at the state level that were at the federal level. So we were just going over the same thing at the federal level, whereas we're trying to get the state to assume that. And then you set the standards. They had some approval process, but it hasn't worked out exactly the way we intended it, because we still have almost as many Fed people working on the projects as we had before.
Well, we have devolved, in Texas in particular, a lot of the responsibilities. On IJRs, I'm going to need to get back to you. I don't know the specific story.
Either
in
of these
Florida.
guys know you're...
That's not really their area
No,
of
no, okay.
responsibility. But
Could
we
you-
can get
could
back
you-
to you.
yeah.
Sure.
But again, trying to devolve as much as we can to the states. We don't have to eliminate positions, but through attrition, we can absorb some of the positions. But somehow it doesn't seem like our original intent to consolidate, to eliminate as much of the federal role. And again, you've got a couple big states now taking that over. Ohio is a good-sized state, maybe Florida, Utah. But at some point, the rules have been set. We don't need all of those rule-setting people. Is it correct there's only about 20 positions that have been eliminated?
Well, I would not tie any elimination of positions to MAP 21. We have, in fact,
Ooh,
reduced our FTEs.
that's not good news.
As I explained, the purpose of MAP 21, or we see it, is there was a reduction in the number of programs, but our responsibilities to oversee the federal aid highway program remained. And it still requires, we've got fewer people now overseeing a larger program.
Well, only larger the last week.
Well, $42 billion program.
And then it should be overseeing at a smaller level, because you have two big states which now have more responsibility at the local and state level than they do at the federal.
They have responsibility to do their NEPA work, their environmental work, and we no longer in California, and to some extent in Texas, there's a transition period because we're still carrying on some projects. Those people's responsibilities have been, we no longer have people doing that. They're exercising other responsibilities to oversee the program. I'd also point out in Texas and California and in any other state, border projects that cross state borders or international borders remain the responsibility of FHWA.
You could see that, but again, I don't know, maybe we need to get an inspector general to look at what's going on. Maybe we need sort of an analysis of what can be done as effectively at the local level with some federal checkoffs, or, again, you testified you had set standards, and that work is now complete, and you don't see any possibility of reducing the personnel.
I wouldn't tie it to that. I think a lot of the work we've done to implement the project we've implemented rules, issued guidance, particularly those that had statutory deadlines, to expedite delivery of projects.
That's done. Now you would be more of an audit, or from time to time modifying those rules. But it doesn't seem like you need the full court press of federal bureaucrats doing that. Maybe, Mr. Swanke, I'm telling you, it was very difficult to get anybody to come and testify. They're all terrified of DOT, and now with authority for 5 years, they're afraid you all are going to hammer them if you come and say something. I don't like that at all. If I have to put bags on their head and subpoena them and bring them in here, we're going to find out what we can do more efficiently, getting information from people who are seeing it. But I go back to the district in Florida, I go around the country, and I'm hearing the same thing. The feds still have, they're just moving the red tape around, and the intent and purpose of MAP 21 wasn't just to do that. So I don't know if you want to comment and risk all of your federal funding, Mr. Swanky. Go right ahead. What do you think? And actually, this is a good news story because they have taken it. Oh, and a tangential question. Have you all sent out anything to the state DOT saying that we now have completed the rules, we now have these things, standards in place, and that you can do such and such? Has there been such a communication?
We have been we're constantly in communication. We have an office in every state that works
But
very
if you
closely
have
with
a
the state
letter that's
DOTs.
gone out to them, I'd like to see that as part of the record, okay?
Yes, sir.
Or if you haven't, well, maybe the staff, we can ask Secretary Fox to get something out, because it does take a while to get the rules of the game in place. The rules are in place, and now we want folks to know what the opportunities are, relieving some of your responsibility. You could probably do great things in Washington, and again, we could also eliminate some of the red tape. But back to Mr. Swanky, have you, tell us your experience and where you've been, you've seen the process, and then what you see as the potential?
Yeah, I think first off, getting into the program, the NEPA assignment program, there is that time frame, but I think Tom did explain well that we started towards pursuing the program prior to the final rulemaking, and that was with the approval and the working relationship with Federal Highways that we had, moving towards that, saying we'll work with you to apply to get your application going, despite the rules not being finalized yet. And so we very much appreciated that working relationship. And so that, combined with our internal process, reworking and waiting for the final rule to come out, and then getting our MOU executed, I think that is probably not the typical time frame for to gauge what it takes to get entry into the program, because we were first and we were started before the final rule was in place. Working with our FHWA division office and headquarters as well, they were very supportive in getting us into the NEPA assignment program. And so, especially from the headquarters level, their cooperation and their understanding of getting us ready, I think, is something that we would describe as a partnership. So I would say that was a positive experience.
Okay. And do you see the potential for this, well, for your role in taking on more responsibilities? Is that possible? Do you think you'll need additional legislation to accomplish that? Is there anything in the new legislation you think that will help you move forward even faster?
I think the way it is laid out that now the application process in the MOU is very workable, and the states that I mentioned earlier that are pursuing it now have moved along fairly quickly. The MOU that we negotiated or worked with Federal Highways with has been used as a template moving forward. And
Is okay, is that the same that California is using, or are they both, other than the names, but are they basically the same?
There are some differences because California was in a pilot program before MAP 21, and we're actually in the process of renewing California's assignment.
Can you have one MOU that would be available for the states that want to sign up?
It is absolutely. I think what we'll see in Ohio is very, very close. There's some
And how long would
distinctions.
the Ohio approval process take? You said about a year?
For our process?
Yeah, to do the MOU?
Well, the MOU itself was probably close to a year, maybe 10 months or so. But again, there were some exceptional issues with that.
Okay.
So Ohio, I believe we received the formal application in April, and it should be done by the end of this year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a shorter period of time, and I anticipate with the recent application from Utah that we will move promptly. There is a process that has to go through. There's some public input that
Right.
needs to be sought and so on. but I think the process has reduced, and everybody sort of understands, as Carlos explained, the states are in contact. They know what we're looking for and what's expected of them. And we also assist them. We provide training on certain steps that they need to take responsibility for, how to do legal sufficiency reviews, how to do, and we train them in how to do the work well.
Mr. Zachary, what have you seen from a road builder's standpoint? How's MAP 21 doing? Maybe you've seen some experience now in Texas and California. Are you seeing? Now, some of you did testify that, let's see, California has sped up the process. I don't know how much. Texas, you said about 25% of the time was whacked off.
That's what we're looking at. Again, we're still looking at that data, but it looks like we should be able to achieve 25%. And that's essentially what California has documented for their reduction in time, is about 25%.
And what are you hearing from your contractors and road builders, Mr. Zachary?
Mr. Chairman, what we hear is, and what we see, and speaking as a contractor in Texas, not in the capacity as the chairman of ARPA, what we see is frankly more projects coming to bid, coming out to be executed. Frankly, again, speaking on my own personal behalf, I don't know exactly which of those projects a categorical exclusion was used on, but they tended to be smaller projects for which that would be an appropriate usage. And the number of projects has increased quite a bit in the last 12 to 18 months.
But the expedited categorical is, well, that's expedited also and handled under your MOU, right, and California's. But in general, we've also allowed for an expedited categorical exclusion for the department, right? What are you seeing there, Mr. Etchison?
Well, we have completed all the rulemakings and issued new categorical exclusions. We have programmatic
when was-
agreements with the states. Where
How
they
long has that
exercise-
been in place?
I'd have to get back to you, but I believe the final rule was issued about a year ago.
So it took
but I
about
can-
2 years to get that in place. And maybe, again, staff, we can ask either Inspector General or GAO to look at, probably want to try to get a year snapshot and see what improvements have taken place. Again, and our intent was to try to eliminate red tape, to try to speed up the process. We based some of this, when that, was it Highway 35, the bridge collapsed? And I stood on the bridge with members. Mr. Oberstar and I stood on the floor right after the bridge collapsed and said we'd work together to expedite the replacement of that link in the interstate. And I think 435 days later, I stood with about a dozen members of Congress on the bridge, and that was how many days it took to replace that bridge, to finish the project through permitting, through construction. And that was the beginning of a working relationship with Ms. Boxer and other. California has some of the toughest environmental laws and regulations in the country. But we said if you could do it there, you should be able to do it anywhere. And what we did is we replaced an unsafe bridge with a safe bridge. The bridge that was built many decades ago was not built with any considerations like we have today for the environment. So we stopped dumping water, polluted water and runoff into the Mississippi River. We actually improved the quality of the natural waters, a safer bridge, and we did it in record time, which also saves a record amount of money, because a lot of instead of building structures, you're paying for red tape and process. So that was one of our models. And then California was a great example, because California has been hit with the natural phenomena of earthquakes. And in fact, they've had to rebuild things, and they do it in the best fashion, environmentally sensitive attention, and also in rapid fire, which is what we're trying to speed up. I have more questions, but I have been joined by our ranking member. I'm only 14 minutes over, is that? So you got plenty of time, just, I'll let her ask some questions, and we'll try to keep it moving.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for my late return. I was under the impression we were going to do another vote right away, so I was sitting there, and they said, oh, no, 10 minutes, so they'll probably interrupt us. But I'd like to discuss the need for significant investment. MAP 21 was important legislation, and now that it's been replaced by the new long-term reauthorization, the FAST Act, I sort of want to be sure to continue the spirit of investment. In the Chicagoland area, we have 200 bridges that have been deemed, and I probably am not getting the technical terms correct, but unsafe, but okay to be used, or substandard, but okay to be used. And I wonder what that means, and I would like to know where those are so that I don't drive over them or have my baby over them. But Mr. Erickson, can you explain, why the 5-year legislation with consistent funding is important to enabling states to move forward with transportation projects, especially when you have something like 200 bridges? You can't really, my understanding, you can't really replace them all, but to sort of look at the long-term effect of the importance of this type of funding for state and municipalities in terms of infrastructure projects.
Well, having a long-term bill provides stability, certainty, so that states and localities can do their planning. And even on particularly larger projects, they know the money's going to be there. I would agree with you that FAST is a start. There's a 2013 Status of the Nation's Highways and Bridges Transit Conditions and Performance Report that was submitted to Congress. And as of 2010, the backlog of unmet highway and bridge needs had grown to about $800 billion. Addressing that backlog would require about $145 billion per year. We as a nation spend about $100 billion per year, so we're not even keeping up with that need. FAST is absolutely a great start. It provides that certainty, but I would agree more funding, as we had proposed in the Grow America Act, is needed.
Mrs. Zachary, with the capability that we have, if we were to, be able to fund as much as we want, with the capacity for bridge builders and road builders, how long is it going to take us to actually invest in and actually do the work of, if we were to go after, all of the infrastructure, the bridges and the roads in this nation? I mean, I would think that the sheer volume of what needs to be done, even if we threw a ton of money at it, it's going to take a while.
It would take a while. I've actually never even in my wildest dreams thought about that scenario, if there was so much money to do it. You've got issues of workforce development and the skills to actually go out and execute the work. The public entities, the DOTs, FHW has to administer it and track it. You've got all of the permitting processes that have to go through. If you had an unlimited amount of money to go and try to address it, it would likely still, it would still take you a decade or something. I'm making up a number.
Right.
It would take many years, and remember that every time you put a road or any transportation system, an airport, anything in service, it immediately starts to degrade. And so you've also got maintenance costs as the system gets expanded. You have an ongoing maintenance requirement that in a lot of states is as significant as a capacity expansion requirement or greater. And so it's just because we're spending more money doesn't mean we're not going to have to continue to spend more money.
Can you compare where we are to other nations that we would be competing against? We've talked extensively about the fact that the lack of investment in our infrastructure is something that's actually hurting our economy, where we're not able to, it's costing us money, it's costing commuters money, it's costing businesses money. In your position as head of your organization, can you talk a little bit about what is happening internationally and where do we stand in competition with countries that are, our economic partners, but also our competitors, places like, Europe and Asia?
I don't have that information in front of me, but I'd be happy to get that for you.
Okay,
I know that the general discussion is that in certain countries, emerging countries in China and others, that they spend a greater percentage of their GDP on infrastructure than we do in the U.S.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Atchison, can you address that a little bit and maybe describe briefly the national performance goals established by MAP 21 for the federal highway programs as well?
I would need to get back to you on how our
Uh-huh.
expenditures compare with other nations, but I'm sure we have that information, and we'll get it to you. The national performance measures is, well, we've done a series of rulemakings. We have proposed all the rules save one. We're hoping to get that out in the first, so there's 6 total rules. The last one hopefully will be in the first quarter of 2016. We're moving to finalize the first performance management rule, which deals with safety. And the second performance management rule should also be sometime in at least the first 6 months of 2016. And then there's associated rules. There's an update to the highway safety improvement program, thank you, and also our planning rule,
So,
asset management rule, excuse me.
So once you've completed your part on the rules, how long do the states have to establish the measure? I mean, how long do you have after you've established performance measures for the states to implement their targets?
I'm going to turn this one over to Mr. Stefanos, who could probably answer that more accurately than I could.
They have 1 year from the effective date of the final rules to establish targets.
To establish targets, do you have as part of the rules, or how long, how far out they can make those targets?
We've proposed that there's 3 rulemakings that propose the measures. 2 of them have been issued as proposals. So for the safety rule, it's 1 year. So they're setting safety targets for the end of the next calendar year. And then for our pavements and bridges, they're setting targets looking out 2 and 4 years. But in both cases, those targets need to be incremental steps that lead towards a longer-term expectations that would be documented in their long-range plan or asset management plan.
So you will set the maximum measure for the target, right? The time period that they can take. Is that a base? Is that what you would consider the baseline, or is that just the maximum? Like, I guess my question is, do you establish a baseline and then say, okay, here's the baseline for this particular target, but you can take longer, but we prefer this to be the baseline. And once the targets are set, can you modify them?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I may have misunderstood your
Okay.
your question about timing. When I was referring to the time frame, it's the time horizon that they're setting the target to. So,
Right.
for example, they want to reduce fatalities by a certain number by the end of the next calendar year. The base that we aren't through rulemaking establishing any minimum standards of what that target shall be. The baseline that they're to base the target on is proposed in the rulemaking, what they already use and where that data is to come from. It would be the most recent data that they would have had available and that we have available in the national data source. And then they do, to answer your second question about adjusting that target, for the safety target for 1 year, we're proposing that they don't have an opportunity to adjust that. They set it and they're held accountable to it. But for the pavement bridge targets, the 4-year target that they would be setting, at the 2-year point, they have an opportunity to adjust those targets. How they adjust them and why they adjust them would be documented on the website, so there's transparency. And then this would recur every 2 years after that point.
And if I could just add, it's just to be clear, is we set the measure. So
Okay.
fatalities, rate of fatalities, the number of fatalities. It is the state's responsibility to set the target in the manner that Mr. Stefanos just described.
If that happens and they fail to meet the target, what happens? What are the consequences of a state meeting a target that they themselves set to try to meet your measure? What are the consequences?
It depends on the target, but for the safety target, if they fail to make significant progress towards that, they would have to invest a certain more amount of money to improve their performance there. On some of the other targets, pavement, bridges, and some of the performance management 3, the congestion and freight and air quality, they may have some reporting requirements. So additional reporting requirements. And under the FAST Act, which we're just trying to get a handle on, there's a new if they fail to meet the freight target, they need to provide a report explaining how they're going to achieve that target in future years.
Would their funding be affected? Because here's the thing that I'm worried about, right? Illinois is a state that's on the verge of bankruptcy. We're in deep financial trouble. So you could have a state like Illinois that has set a target, but finds that it's not meeting, does not have the funds to meet that target. But then can the federal funding then be cut as a result of them not meeting their targets, which puts them further in the hole?
No, their funding is set by statute. They will get the same amount of money. With respect to the safety provisions, if they fail to meet their safety targets, they'll have to just spend more of that money to address those safety issues.
So that's how you would enforce the state targets, is the statute has that mechanism in it?
Correct.
Okay. Is there any incentive for states to exceed their targets? What if they do really well, to encourage them to pursue more ambitious targets?
What we think, and again, I might have Pete expand upon this, but we're trying to be as transparent about this as possible. And so we're setting, I think the plan and idea is that a lot of this information is going to be out there in the public. So if the state fails to set an adequate target or sets a very easy target, that information is going to be available to the entire public. So I think there's an incentive for the states just based on that, having all of this information be transparent to try to set targets, both that are realistic that they can achieve, but that are ambitious as well.
Do you feel that and anyone can on the panel can answer this, do you feel that the deadlines set in the legislation in the MAP 21 were too ambitious?
Well, I think as the GAO reported, some of the rulemaking, particularly in the performance management area, were very ambitious. It was developing a whole new program, new standards, new methods, new data. We're moving through that, and as I said, I expect at least within the next 6 months, we will have 2 of those 3 performance management rules final, and we'll have the other one proposed. So yes, they were very ambitious. We're working as expeditiously as we can to complete them.
Well, I'm encouraged to hear about the progress that's being made with the rulemaking. I think it's important to balance the need to have rules promulgated in a timely manner, as well as the need to ensure that the rules are actually carefully vetted and stakeholders are given the opportunity to express their views. So I thank you for the hard work that you're doing. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you. I was reading the letter that you all sent us September 22nd, looking at the projects, and then you had listed projects, not projects, but programs that you had consolidated or eliminated. I count 12 programs that say not continued under MAP 21 program is spending down prior balances. So I count 12 that would be eliminated at the federal level. Is that right, Mr. Etchison?
That's correct. The states are responsible. That money is still available for the states to spend, and we're encouraging them and working with them.
Would we say after that these that this could result in some reduction in positions at the federal level?
Again, with all due respect, that the size of the federal aid highway program hasn't changed. The eligibilities for these different programs are now captured under, say, the surface transportation, the STP program. A lot more flexibility for the states to focus those expenditures as they deem appropriate.
But it doesn't require the same federal oversight office. All of these, maybe you could send us to a list of who was involved in those positions previously, and then where they've been absorbed to.
I can see what we can get you, but we're not organized by program. We're organized by function. So we have
Okay,
people.
well, function. The Appalachian Development Highway System, it says not continued under MAP 21. So was there somebody in charge of that before? I can get your directory, your old directory, and look these people up.
There may have been somebody in charge of that program.
Do you
but again,
guys know the two, was there somebody in charge of that before, or people in an office? Was there an office?
That was a function within an office. There was a person that one of their collateral duties was to oversee the Appalachian Development Highway System.
Yeah.
They still do so. Those balances are out there for states. The balances are available till expended. So those balances will spend down over many more years going forward. So it's one of their many collateral duties.
So
in
you
their
can't
office.
really get rid of a program per se.
Eventually it will be eliminated.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying,
Eventually
but that
once-
was 3 years ago.
Mhm.
This is, last time I checked, 2015, 3 years.
Right.
I'm not sure if we took care of this in the new legislation. I'm sure we didn't. But I've got at least a dozen here you reported to me in that situation. Not to mention consolidation, I could see, consolidated with another one. But this says spending down prior balances and how long they would go. We don't do earmarks anymore, so I've got to find out from the Transportation Committee your progress in spending these balances down. Now, I could have probably, Etchison, I could have probably given a better case than you did on what you've done. If you go back and look at what you sent me, you should put this in the record, and I will for you. In 2003, you had 2,366 FTEs. We were administering $30 billion, it was 30.8 billion. In 2012, you had $40 billion, and you had 2,302, which is fewer people than in 2003. See, I would have touted that. Tell Fox that you guys need to tout yourself on that kind of stuff. But then in 2014, that's where we went down to 2,281. Now, what I'd like to do is either have GAO or the IG come back and tell us, you're telling us how many projects you work on. And I think we need to look at those. This is dollars. What are you going up to in this program under MAP 21 for the next year? Do you know, Etchison?
I believe it's around $43 billion.
So it's going up $3 billion. But I want to go back and look at anecdotally and chronologically the number of projects that were involved. So let's get that from either them or the IG or GAO when we do this little report. So we'll see how many actual projects you are doing. You have $3 billion more. Well, it's only $1 billion more because it's 42 currently. And then we'll look at these dozen programs that and how long the spend out or the spending down of prior balances is expected to continue. Maybe we can get the prior balances and for all of those programs. So those are some of the things we'd like to see. Now, I have a couple of other questions. In the bill, we opened the door for, hey, and here you go, Etchison. Again, this gave you some new responsibilities under public-private partnerships. I know I'm familiar with the one we have in Central Florida, which in record time was open. I hope it wasn't just because I was chairman, but we're doing a $2.4 billion adding tolls to the center median. We kept free lanes free because the federal government, my philosophy is the taxpayers, federal taxpayers already paid for them, so we shouldn't be charging for them again. But we said the right-of-way inside median, some of those assets could be converted as long as they were adding capacity. Now, we had the $2.4 billion Central Florida project. Maybe Zachary or Edgison, some of you guys might know how many others have taken advantage of a similar expansion of capacity through a public-private partnership. And that would be, Etchison, here's where you pipe in and you say, well, we have new responsibilities, like your new road in Central Florida, Mr. Micah, we had to do. Any ideas, Zachary?
I don't have a number, Mr. Chairman.
You
but
do.
there-
Maybe you could check that, get it
Yes, sir.
back to.
Absolutely.
I'd like to see, did that have an impact? I know it did in my community. I've heard of several others looking at that option. Etchison, you know anything about it?
Well, our TIFIA office works very closely with and has helped
You
stimulate.
raised TIFIA, and I did $1 billion in TIFIA, didn't we? And I think it went down by 60%. Can you tell us what?
I believe it's 287 million in the fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's actually gone down. Did we spend out the billion in Tifia?
It's not fully spent down, but I
That's
don't
one
have
of
the
those-
information in front of me.
But obviously, there isn't as much money available. I'm not happy about that. That was a real screw-up they did.
Yeah.
Transportation infrastructure financing.
And not spending it.
Well, and that's another good question for these guys, is finding out how many TIFIA programs they had, how many people were involved, and how much was spent down, how much was unspent. They may have done that in taking the money down, I don't know, if that was a reason. At one time, I heard there were 4 or 5 times the dollar number of requests that we had, or even more. But now we've lessened that. Do you know anything about that, Zachary?
Sir, I've heard that same general statistic that you had. I saw something recently about the percentage of TIFIA funding that was utilized by each state. And I think the largest was actually Texas, that had availed itself of 20% of the total program dollars from TIFIA. But again, I don't know how many specific projects were tied up with either TIFIA or on a P3 basis.
Okay. Well, and does anyone know anything more about the public-private partnerships? Any information on that?
I have a little more
Yeah, go
information,
ahead.
which is, you mentioned the I-4 project.
Yeah.
I think that was what you were referring to. We've used P3 projects on the Goethals Bridge, the Portsmouth Bypass in Ohio, and SH22 is now, or 288, excuse me, is taking advantage of the P3 process. On TIFIA, we have 59 TIFIA loans that we've closed. So it has been a very effective project. We're fully supportive of public-private partnerships.
Well, see, and just the next time you come in and say, oh, Mr. Chairman, because of your great work on MAP 21 and you put more into TIFIA, we did 59 projects that required more personnel because of what you did on the public-private partnerships. You've got yours in Orlando, and then you just named the others. Make sure I get a list of those because I want to use that. But that does take more personnel too. So I don't mind giving DOT additional personnel, but we also, our intent was to try to devolve as much as we could of the red tape that Mr. Swanky talked about, that I can't get the others to come and testify on, that you're still imposing. Because some of those folks have stayed in DOT, even though we've tried to devolve some activities to the, as many as possible to the local level, and they have a new role justifying their existence, and that's what concerns me. You see my point?
I do, but I would say we're fully supportive of the devolution of certain requirements of CEs. The states are responsible for all these CEs. They have to report to us, but there's not much, there's limited oversight by FHWA, except when they tried to create a new CE. But on the CEs that were developed in the statute that you referred to.
And then, again, you could come in and say that we've gone from whatever it was, more back in 2003 with less money, and I'm sure it would be less projects and doing more. So I'm trying to make your case for you, for DOT. I'll help you with a testimony next time.
Thank you.
All right. But I think it would be very helpful if we look at this, where our success is, where we can get you out of the red tape business, where we can devolve to the states, where I can get more money back quicker to the states because they turn the projects around quickly. What you told me you went to 1,800. What was like your previous record?
That's about what we've done in the past couple of years, but before that, it was more below 1,500, more like in the 12 to 1,400 range.
Oh, that you're talking actually what you testified to, about 25% more efficiency out of it. So when we did the road show for the MAP 21, we took the committee across the country, and we just heard one place after another cut the red tape. There are things that we can do locally, less in Washington, more state and local, and we could get the money out faster, get the projects done and approved faster. And sometimes you don't want to degrade the environment in any ways, but in any event, but sometimes they're very similar. In fact, I think California and some of the states have even tougher environmental requirements than the federal government. Is that not the case, Mr. Zachary, Mr. Etchison, yeah?
Yes, at least our perspective, yes, sir, that California has very rigorous environmental standards that as a general rule exceed federal
Yeah.
requirements.
And we negotiated map 21. Of course, Ms. Boxer's still the ranking person there, but she was chair, and she wasn't going to give 1 inch on any issue regarding the environment that she felt wasn't being protected by actions in map 21. Well, I think this hearing is really just to sort of take the temperature of what we've done with the last bill, the new bills coming in. If we have to, we can do some technical adjustments with Chairman Schuster and others. But what we want to do is get the biggest bang for the buck. We want to, if you need more personnel, and we have programs at the federal level that warrant them, we want to make certain that you have adequate resources and personnel. What I think it would be very good, and I'd like to I'll talk to the secretary, and we'll ask the secretary to see if he can send out a letter now saying that some of these standards have been set to the states, and that we have maybe even a model of a MOU, and see if there's more interest in devolving. That's our intent, Congress's intent. Nobody has to do it, but letting the states know that it's there. We've hammered out some of the details to get us there, and here's an example. I think that would be most helpful. Mr. Zachary, you guys are building them, and we want to get the maximum for the money. We need to know from you where there are any opportunities that for moving this whole process forward faster can be realized. And a lot of it can be the administration. We've got new legislation in place, but we can work with the secretary and others to get these things done. And I really appreciate Mr. Swanky risking his entire transportation program in his relationship with DOT to risk coming here today. You're the only one I could find in the entire country. The others ran like scalded rabbits.
My
Mr.
pleasure.
D. Sullivan, did you have any questions? Welcome, sir.
Since I walked in and you were talking about California environmental rules and Senator Boxer, I just had a question to the FHA. In California, we did get, when I was still in the legislature, a lot of input from our contractors and Caltrans about water permits. And I wonder, without, from my perspective, pardon the expression, diluting the protection either in the California Environmental Quality Act or in NEPA, do you look at those kind of things in terms of effectiveness and maybe making it, if there are obstacles to getting it done efficiently? Because we get a lot of that from the contractors.
We absolutely have taken several steps to expedite those and coordinate those reviews. Just recently, we, along with the Corps of Engineers, reissued the Red Book, which is all about aligning environmental reviews. We're supporting, at least on the federal side, the use of a single environmental document that all the different federal agencies can and should rely upon. So we take several steps to try to coordinate that and expedite that. We have a permitting dashboard that's up for certain projects. We have an e-NEPA project where all the environmental documents can be shared electronically instead of by hand with copies being sent around. It's all to try to expedite and reduce the time it takes to permit and proceed with a project.
And do you measure those outcomes over time to see if they're still getting the environmental outcomes you want to, but are help facilitating getting the projects up and done?
I don't know that we've had it in place, all those efforts long enough to make that sort of evaluation, but that's something we're always looking at to ensure that what we're doing is protective of the environment.
And then just on a different subject matter, but somewhat similar, read on, I believe your website or DOT's website about performance standards in general, and that states are taking, a lot of states taking leadership. I think Washington, Minnesota, Massachusetts come to mind. So just watching what they're doing when it comes to performance standards for the future, both what you have in the act, but potentially new ones. Do you continue to engage with the state agencies when it comes to performance standards?
I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, but in terms of our performance management program, we have one of the important things, because it is a completely new program with a lot of new requirements for the states and localities, is we've engaged with our stakeholders extensively to ensure we get their input and to ensure that whatever we ultimately finalize is sort of minimizes the administrative burden that's being placed on them.
So it would be twofold in my mind. One would be just project delivery on the new capital side, and then the maintenance and operations. So for instance, in Washington, it has something called a gray book, where they actually do by corridor, every quarter, they measure both investments in the corridor, capital investments, improvements, and maintenance and operations, and then they tell the public what the results have been in terms of congestion. So do we do things just to make sure that we're mindful that these, as the expression goes, the states are the laboratories, and we're keeping up with them, or at least being apprised of it, on both sides, project delivery and then maintenance and operations of the system?
I think I'd have to get back to you. I'm not quite sure. I mean, in terms of our performance management program, we're absolutely building off of what states are doing. We're trying to build a national program. In terms of project delivery, we work, obviously the states are the laboratories of democracy, and if they've got great ideas, we've got a whole program called Everyday Counts that works very closely with the states and, you know, pushes forward new and innovative ideas so that we can expedite project delivery. One that Mr. Micah mentioned before about the bridge. We've got a whole new sort of bridge program where we install these bridges promptly. They're sort of precast, pre-built bridges that are dropped into place. That was all a result of our Everyday Counts program. So we're trying to do different things, working with the states to expedite project delivery, as well as ensure protection of the environment.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and if you can get me any material, I'd be delighted to look at it.
Yes, sir.
Any additional questions, Ms. Duckworth? Well, I want to thank you for participating today. We made some progress. We're also finding some new ways to develop projects. I attended a conference with Bobby Scott down in Orlando, a simulation conference, and one of the technologies we saw there that was developed for simulation was training bridge inspectors. It's hard to replicate some of the training and also have bridges that are defective and going out. It's a very costly, time-consuming. But I was quite impressed with some of the advances for training personnel, see what's out there, what's safe. Some of the monitoring now we have of the bridges are new. And some of those are new programs. Etchison, you got to put this stuff in your next testimony of new things you're doing. But there is a lot of good news. We always try to strive to do better, and you've given us some information today. We're going to ask you for additional questions, fill in the blank. So we're going to leave the record open. I have the testimony of Michael P. Milanofi, and he is the President and CEO of American Public Transportation, APTA. We'll put that in the record without objection, so ordered. He's not with us, but has a wealth of suggestions and recommendations, observations. Then there being no further business, again, I want to thank our witnesses and two other participants for being with us today. And we will adjourn this hearing. Thank you.